Welcome to our Stay Invested client webinar series. I'm Scott Hallberg, your host today. I'm co-founder of T&H Realty and a local real estate investor with almost 25 years of real estate professional experience. Today, we're going to discuss property maintenance, an issue that all property owners have and have to deal with, and it's one of the real pain points of property management. We have a great panel today of local area experts that are going to share their experiences and hopefully advice to help deal with this. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panel. First is Chris.
Hi, my name is Chris Herring. I'm the Director of Client Services here at T&H Realty. I am best way to describe me as a would-be investor who got sucked into the property management world. I currently own and operate 2 rental properties.
All right, Jonathan.
Thanks, Scott. I'm Jonathan Taranjo. I'm with Off Lease Construction. I've been with them for about a year now, coming up on that. I'm also an investor. I have approximately 10, 11 properties that I personally take care of. And I've been involved with, as the Director of Maintenance here at Off Lease Construction. I've been involved in property management and maintenance construction for approximately 8 to 10 years now. I've seen a lot of things come and go.
Okay, and finally we have Nick.
Yeah. So I started this whole game as one of these long distance investors from California, so very familiar with what a lot of you guys are doing with the property management world. Ended up moving out here during COVID. Got a decent sized portfolio, and I'm an accidental construction company owner. So we do fix and flips here in the area, and started that business because I needed to support my rental portfolio. And I've learned a little bit about the maintenance side of the house thanks to Jonathan here on the call.
Well, great. Well, thanks for you guys all being here today, and I'm looking forward to hearing your insights. But today, yeah, we're conducting this webinar because we understand how important maintenance is as a topic. And, us as a property management company, we dedicate a lot of time and resources to managing maintenance. I mean, it's like a three-ring circus. I mean, we have multiple people involved. We have residents, technicians, and of course our clients. And so it's like herding cats. You got to, manage all different angles, and a lot of things happen. But yeah, to answer that basic question, unfortunately, maintenance happens. It will happen. And, I know personally, I've had, in owning 40 units for about 25 years now, I spent a ton on maintenance, and it's just an inevitable part of owning real estate. I'd like to go around the panel here and just kind of start off with your, any recent anecdotes or any personal experiences you've had recently about maintenance. Maybe Chris.
I kick that off. I see the perspective of the clients day in, day out. That's very much what the teams that I interact with or that report to me, what we deal with. We're dealing with the client relations side, the project management side particularly. So those are the turnover side of the business, and then the maintenance department as well. And look, it's been said before, maintenance is a no-win situation. Nobody likes it. Nobody wants it to happen. And with what we've experienced over the last 3 to 5 years, whatever the timeline is for the COVID years, labor's increased, materials have increased. Now we're dealing with tariffs and everything else. And so sometimes it's that trap of, 5 years ago it was really cheap, or it's something to the effect of, I can run down to Home Depot and I can buy that material for X number of dollars, and they're not, it's sometimes it seems simpler than it really is.
Yeah. I can speak to it. Like I said, I've got a property manager that manages all of my portfolio, and then I've got Jonathan here on our team who runs maintenance. I know whenever Jonathan calls me, I know whenever my property management calls me, it's going to be expensive. It sucks, but you need to be accruing for it on a regular basis. I'm sure we're going to talk more about that here over the course of this call. We all have our metrics that we assume are going to come out of our rent checks every single month in order to account for these things. And it's not going to be linear. It's going to build up some months and then some months less. But in the last couple of days, I've had a fence fall down in one of my yards. I don't know, Jonathan, what else has gone wrong in my portfolio that's made me cry this week? I'm sure you've gotten a couple of people who've reached out about that stuff.
Well, lateral lines might trigger something for you. As I mentioned that, you've definitely had a little rash of those.
Yeah.
So that would be something that I know that has came up for you. I guess for me, something that I would like to mention is just kind of having a plan and being prepared to know that it is inevitably something that's going to exist, and having prompt communication is things that help us out as well. From that is as far as it not being it's a surprise that the specific thing happened, but it's not a surprise that something happened. And having kind of the ability and the wherewithal to react to that so that we can control damages, control tenant satisfaction concerns and things like that. I know that working directly with Nick sometimes helps me get an advantage on promptly being able to handle some things. But as far as client and property management relationships, I feel like that's something that sometimes gets overlooked. It's just being totally prepared and not not so surprised that occasionally something does happen when you have a portfolio.
Yeah, it's that dread. I feel you guys. I mean, it's that dreaded, oh, my property manager's calling. There must be something broken, call that everyone dreads. But yeah, for me personally, we've had a rash every this year so far. We've had a HVAC system replacement needed. And so that's not a good way to start off the first 4 months of the year. I'm like feeling the pain there. But yeah, a lot of things happen, unfortunately. And even in my personal house. I mean, it seems like every day I wake up and something else is broken or needs to be fixed, some little nuisance issue. And it's just my wife and I at that house. But we live in a 50-year-old house, and it's kind of going through a cycle now where it just has, I'm on my third water heater, I'm on my second dishwasher, I'm on my third microwave, things like that just happen. So, all
Yeah, I
right.
just gotta try to close my eyes when I look at my personal home right now because I'm focused on remodeling a rental property. I'm like, Mr. Home, the one I live in, you just need to hold it together for another 3 months because right now I am too busy. I'm up every weekend putting in the sweat equity on a property. And even though I've been in there every weekend, that other property, it's really hard to stay on that budget that we've mapped out. And it feels like the prices are changing on a weekly basis in some cases.
Right. Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of stories about that. Well, today we're going to go ahead and we'll hopefully address some of these in a little more detail, some of these topics that were just discussed. I mean, the main thing is how to deal with maintenance overall. Um, there's a different approach when you are a landlord versus a homeownership. Kind of go over that in detail. And then, yeah, why is it so expensive now? I mean, really, that's a question we get every day, and we'd like to try to address that if we can. And then obviously at the end, we want to wrap this up with some strategies that hopefully help people, come to terms with it and or plan for it a little better. So that's kind of the plan for today. So we'll first start off, as far as one thing that's, you know, comes to mind when you become a landlord, it's really trying to adopt a business mindset. And so, what I do at my personal house, like maybe I would tolerate a leaky faucet or a running toilet, you know, because I was too busy, don't want to deal with it, whatever. Well, when you have a resident in a house and it's a business, it is something different now. And a lot of it comes down to legal requirements. The state has certain rules and that we have to follow as far as providing certain aspects of a home, like it has to have hot water at all times, it has to have a heat source at all times, has to have secure windows, etc. There's just certain things that we have to do and that we're basically contractually bound with the state of Indiana that we have to provide an inhabitable home at all times. Other thing is that, if you have a loose handrail and we don't care as a homeowner, well, if the tenant grabs that and it comes off and they fall down the stairs and hurt their ankle, that's a lot of liability. So we have to make sure we protect liability. And then at the end of the day, like I said, because it's a business, we have these customers who are residents. And, there's our industry has a lot of data out there about resident satisfaction. Lack of maintenance response is one of the leading factors in people moving out homes. And so we want to always provide a home that residents can enjoy and also they feel proud about living in. And that produces, generally speaking, longer term residents and longer term leases that leads to less turnover and vacancy. So, and at the end of the day, these are large assets that you hold. For me, I can speak to this personally. This is a major part of my retirement plan. I want these assets to be maintained and preserved as far as the value and equity that I built up. And so not taking care of maintenance on a regular basis can definitely lead to worse problems and obviously larger expenses down the road. Any thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah,
Yeah, you go,
it's a
Chris.
big thing it's a big thing for me. The having well repaired, that hits home from the 9 years that I've been doing property management. What I've seen is the homes that were well repaired up front are the ones that tend to win in the long term. And I've taken that philosophy myself, that the two homes that I have right now repaired just about everything we can, reasonably think of. There might be a few things where like, this air conditioner can last for another year or two, but we fully expect that thing is, when it goes, and we're going to replace it. Knock on wood, one of my properties, I've had a resident in it for a year now, and knock on wood, I have not had any service calls whatsoever in a year, which is fantastic. Now I know that 5 years down the road, that will probably be a different story.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think being proactive with all this stuff makes a ton of sense in order, like you said, to cover your liability. But the other thing to be thoughtful about here is that small issues become big issues when they're ignored. If there's a small leak today, that becomes subfloor replacement in the future because the subfloor is rotted out. So addressing the small stuff now, even though it's not really causing that much of an inconvenience for your tenant, means that you're going to avoid future big issues. You're going to most likely, like you said, keep the tenant in the home longer. And when they eventually do leave, have that be a cheaper turnover versus it being it might not be a $20,000 turnover. It might only be a $6,000 turnover, whatever that number ends up being, because you've been proactive. So thing that I was just kind of writing down and thinking about is you need to have two competing thoughts when you're doing maintenance. Number one, you need to be looking for things to maintain. And number two, as an owner here, in most of these situations, just keep your eyes closed and like let the property manager, if it's under the NTE, you don't need to know about it. Just let them do the things that they need to do in order to keep that tenant in place. Because let me tell you, turnover is your number one, your number one drain on your cash flow.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's a good, very valid point because, yeah, we're talking about routine maintenance specifically, but there is a lot of maintenance that happens during turnovers as well, and those tend to be more project based. And you know, personally, like I have one or two homes that have had the same resident for nearly 20 years. I've never had a turnover there. So that, saving that and keeping those residents happy has saved me thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars over the years. But I sure have routine maintenance, and maintenance happens. It may not happen every month, but you'll have a couple months where you have maintenance, and then you might not have maintenance for a while, and then there will be another maintenance issue. And look, we as a company, in our professional duty, is that we vet and review all maintenance. And we have some things that are tenant responsibility, but a lot of things are unfortunately owner's responsibilities. And we look at every job to make sure it's legitimate first. And we only handle and we only conduct legitimate maintenance. We don't want there to be maintenance necessarily, but when a tenant reports there's a problem, we're duty bound to try to address that, not only for them, but also for our owners, so those big issues don't become large.
And I would piggyback one thing that I know from a maintenance perspective that really adds a lot of value and I think drives costs down. Are owners that have a realistic and reasonable NTE setup. If you're sitting here with one of those people that wants to have a $300 NTE, you're going to cost yourself more money than somebody who's probably got $1,000 one based on the realistic expenses of today's construction and maintenance. So I think that's something that's highly valuable, that when we can go out, disturb your tenant one time, resolve the issue on one trip, and charge you for one visit that you eventually pay for one way or another. I think that's something that's overlooked in the general perspective and purview of ownership. When they see somebody asking for a higher NTE, it's really to protect them and their pocketbook more than it is to be able to squeeze a few extra bucks out of any trip to the.
Yeah, that happens a lot. I mean, and I think it's also just tenants sort of do that too. They don't just, I mean, we have tenants that report one issue at a time. But we have a lot of tenants that kind of save up a list and then send a list of 5 or 6 things at once, due to their scheduling and I'm sure their needs. So, well, I mean, so yeah, I think we've established that maintenance happens and, um, a lot of it has to come down with the age of home and the condition it's in. Um, but yeah, I would like to have a little poll here just with the members that are here. We'd like to just get a sense of what you think you spend or what you should spend annually on maintenance per property. So yeah, we'll give that a few seconds to fire off. But yeah, Brooke, do we have a result on that?
Yeah, it looks like 100% of people chose option two, $1,201 to $4,000.
Okay, wow. Okay, well, that's great. I mean, we were hoping we weren't having people that would think there would be absolutely zero. But we hope, yes, occasionally we have some pretty high dollar things, but for the most part, that range does seem to be kind of the typical range. So yeah, when we talk about cost, I mean, the next section we'd like to go over is just really what's happened lately and why is it so expensive? I mean, I think there's two main factors that come into play personally. I think one, first off, we have to use professionals. And, that's really comes down to three factors in my mind. It's really the speed of response and the liability component to this, and then the quality of service. There's always, no one likes to get that call we said earlier where you have a lateral line that's down, but you don't want some guy that just is hanging out in front of a Home Depot that doesn't have a sign on his on his truck said, yeah, I can replace your sewer line for you. I mean, you want to call a reputable licensed contractor to do those type of jobs. And since we're fiduciaries for our clients, it's on our duty that we have to make sure that we spend that money wisely and we have to hire legitimate, well set up companies. They have to have minimum requirements as far as insurance, and they have to be in business for a certain amount of years to make sure they're trustworthy, and they have to provide a warranty. I mean, these are really important aspects to why we hire the people we hire. And we do all the legwork up front. We've been doing this for nearly 25 years, and we've built up a great vendor network of trusted and tried contractors. And, for the most part, they're not going to be the absolute cheapest. I mean, there's just, the absolute cheapest guy is just some guy who just operates out of his house and doesn't have his license, doesn't have insurance. And we just can't take that risk. But, over the last few years, we've definitely had a rapid increase in cost. I remember the days where we would hire general laborers for $7.50, $10 an hour. Now it's $20 to get a heartbeat. And then, skilled laborers, $30 plus. And, that hasn't always been the case. And then material costs, especially foreign made products, they're going to be way more expensive now. It all started with the COVID supply chain issues we had. And really, we're looking at just, multiple factors that have come in to make everything just 2 to 3 times what it used to be, even just a few years ago. Nick, you own a construction company. You probably can speak to this. I don't know if you want to add any insight.
Yeah, I was writing down a couple of notes here. Yes, you're absolutely right. One, insurance is surprisingly expensive to have. The time a project these projects always take longer than you think they're going to. Jonathan and I have talked a lot about like do we need to set pricing on a floor basis on each project just to like go out to the property and unlock that front door simply because there's the time to get out to the property, there's the time to get all your tools out and all of that. So it's surprising, like you can't get as many work orders done in a day as you think you should be able to, simply because obviously you're in a big city. Your house doesn't have economies of scale of like an apartment complex where you can do multiple different work orders on the same day in most situations. So that's all a huge factor. that goes into it. The other thing that I was kind of noting is there's such incredible competition for our labor. We do a great job of vetting our team. We spend a lot of money on recruiting, a lot of time on recruiting. But the number of our guys who get poached from us is quite high on a regular basis. And so we have to be wildly competitive from a pricing perspective in order to keep our incredible team. So I think you've hit the nail on the head there from an inflation perspective on labor side of the house. Materials, yeah, are just absolutely bananas right now. It feels like goes up by the day. And a competent back office is another thing that is surprisingly expensive, but is so incredibly important to one, make sure, like you were talking about warranties, being able to go back out, coordinating with tenants is huge, making sure that our guys are at the right place at the right time. An incredible amount of overhead goes into that in order to make sure that all gets done. And then the last thing I'll just say is not all items, even though they look the exact same on a scope of work, are the exact same in real life. I can't tell you the number of houses that I walk into and the photos look incredible. Somebody just laid some new flooring down on, but my God, it's bouncy. They didn't even didn't even tear out the stuff that was underneath it. And so there are gaps and you're like bouncing all over the place. And so I think you're absolutely right that while two items might be identical on two different scopes of work, the prices are going to be different. You're going to probably get some different output there. So yeah, working with somebody who's reputable, who's willing to back that, and not some chuck in a truck is going to be important.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're sort of a victim of our own, like our city and our areas, I guess, rapid growth. I mean, right now, there's just so many competing construction projects, be it residential, there's still some development in certain areas of the city. There's commercial development going on. I mean, we have a couple of very large scale commercial developments, one of the largest in the country with a hospital addition. And we have several hotels that are going to be built. We just have all this construction, we have road construction going on all the time here in Indianapolis. But yeah, there's this, if you're, and then into trades and you have a good work ethic, you can find and take your pick as far as what kind of job you want to do. So that's what's really escalated the wage cost. I mean, we're landlocked too as well, so we don't have a lot of, you know, um, I guess inbound kind of migratory labor. I mean, it's somewhat locked down. I mean, it's never been an issue here. It's not the same as maybe some of our southern states. So that's kind of another challenge. I mean, I think there's been a lot of studies that show that people are just not entering the trades like they used to anymore. So there's just a labor shortage. But Chris, I mean, I'd like to hear your insight as far as, you run now our maintenance department, not directly, but through your management structure. And you also handle our project managers as well who do the turnover work. What do you think? I mean, we work really hard to try to find, good priced, high value vendors. I mean, can you kind of go over some of those steps that we do?
Yeah, it's an endless battle to try to find, the it's the mechanics triangle, fast, right, and cheap. Well, right is one of the things we have to do. So we take that one out of the triangle. So now we're trying to find fast and cheap simultaneously. And the vendors that are most suited to do the most things are the ones that are going to be their fastest ones. When they have a really knowledgeable labor pool, it's not like, well, I have one guy that can do electrical or install cabinets or whatever it is. If all of their pool or multiple people in their pool can do more of the things that need to be done in a turnover repair environment, they can get things done more quickly. The problem is that guy that knows more, knows how to do more, can lay tile, can do cabinets and everything else. He's not going to take a discount on his labor rate that he gets paid by his company for something simple like a changing a light bulb or something like that. And so then you're kind of faced with, and this is what we do a lot. If particularly those who have had a turnover this year, they probably experienced this already. They may have seen that we chop up that turnover project to more vendors. And one of the things that we're doing there at the very top level, the first pass, is these things called screwdriver work, these simple things, changing light bulbs and fixtures and very simple things like that. We're assigning to our maintenance team because our maintenance team can be 20 to 30% cheaper than a general contractor will be because of the way that we're structured. It's an advantage that we have. But then you've got these companies like Off Leash and some of the other companies who are really knowledgeable and can do just about anything. I can turn them over to a project, give them the whole thing, and they'll get it done very quickly, but it won't be cheap. All right. And they're facing, Nick touched on it, labor loyalty. If you've got a lot of turnover on people, that makes it harder for you to complete jobs quickly. The quality assurance component, the chuck and the truck guys, the guys that clients, sometimes I've had a subset of clients that want us to find the cheapest person in the city of 2 million people and use that person every time. So now I've got to spend a lot of time researching, trying to find that guy. And the reality is that guy isn't well suited for doing anything of scale. You might get lucky, strike gold. He underbids the job. He does it one time. And the third, fourth time, you start to realize this guy's starting to drown in his own debt. Maybe he does good work, but he doesn't manage the business side of what he does well. He's living paycheck to paycheck. It's things like that. And sometimes that added cost, that perceived cost of what you're using from a labor standpoint or from a contractor standpoint feels too expensive, but you're also buying a degree of security with it as well. We've recently reworked our vendor agreement. We just had a open house last week with our vendors about some tweaks and some changes to our agreement between the vendors and ourselves that is intended to help with this. And there are some other initiatives that we're working on right now in the background that's going to try to help get some prices a little more under control, a little more predictable. We've just come out of this environment where the COVID years, I can remember at a point where prices were changing upon delivery, as things were coming in. One of the flooring manufacturers that we used or continue to use actually ended up buying their own ship to get stuff through the ports faster because they were competing with everybody else when it came to getting a shipping container through the port of Los Angeles, and so it's tough. It's not as simple as it sounds, and it's not as simple as just go through the phone book and find a guy with a better price.
Yeah, you can always do that. I mean, I think that, there's no doubt that sometimes, as a homeowner or as an individual investor who's maybe managing their own properties, you can take the time to do that. I mean, and you can deal with the fallout if it doesn't happen. Um, but we find that, like you said, say you strike gold and you get a good guy one time, and then you try to use him again, he's gone. You can't find him. Or you have a warranty issue and he ghosts you. He's not going to come back. I mean, but I've also heard a lot of horror stories. I mean, knock on wood, our company, because we vet our vendors so well, we've had very little issue with, but we had a few. We've had a few vendors that turned south on us and we've lost thousands of dollars, and we've covered that for our clients. So that's a part of it too, is that, we want to make sure that doesn't happen. We would never let an owner be impacted by someone that turned out to be a bad apple. So, we have to factor that into our pricing as well to a certain point. But I think that one of the biggest things that people don't realize is time. I mean, time is money. And, if you also try to find a guy with a low overhead, maybe a single operator kind of guy, it may take him forever to finish a project or even a job. And, you're burning all that daylight, you have all that vacancy. And really our guys, our aim is that we want to find the sweet spot between speed, quality, and cost. And we call that value. I mean, we want to provide value to our clients, but that doesn't necessarily, like you said, that triangle of factors, it's not the lowest cost typically. I mean, there's just too much risk involved with that.
Yeah, and there are perceptions, 10 years ago, paint was pretty cheap. No problem. I can get a house painted very, very cheaply. That's probably one of the costs next to windows that has gone up so much in the last few years. I just, the paint bill for a 2,200 square foot home that I'm personally remodeling myself right now, and I'm using a corporate account. So I get discounted pricing from Sherwin-Williams. I am over $2,000 in just paint. It's when the house that I'm sitting in right here, right now today, bought this thing 25 years ago. We bought the entire paint for this house for about $450.
Yeah.
It's just baffling, and as I get older, I start feeling more and more and sounding more and more like my dad and grousing about the cost of everything.
Well, that was my entry into real estate period, is that, when I was in college, I did college painters. So I painted houses, and yeah, I know what I used to make and what we used to charge, and it was pittance compared to what is going on today. So
yeah, I could buy, in fact, I bought a paint sprayer for less than what it cost me on the labor side of things. I spent $900 on a nice Graco paint sprayer as opposed to hiring a guy to come in and apply the paint that I'm buying, but I'm in there every weekend. We started this project in January, and the only time we work on it is on the weekends. We won't be done until sometime next month. And think about the days of vacancy. If it weren't for the fact that I already have a plan for this one, I'd be sitting for 6 months of no vacancy, and I'm paying, I don't know, $1,300-$1,400 a month on a mortgage. It's
Yeah.
insane.
Well, I mean, that's the point. I mean, people want to save a few $100s on a bid for a restoration job or a turnover job. And meanwhile, you're spending what, $400 a week in vacancy. And so 1 or 2 weeks extra vacancy, you just spent too much money. I mean, you
Yeah.
actually lost money on waiting this out, trying to find the absolute cheapest bid. So
Yeah, I pay, I don't know, $50 to $100 a week for insurance on the property, pay for my mortgage. I pay my portion of my taxes. My taxes on this particular property are $1,000, roughly, call it about $175 a month, something like that is what I'm paying. So if I break that down day by day and what it's costing me when I procrastinate making that decision that I ultimately come to, it's just hurting me is all it's doing. And I'm not making any revenue during that time. And it's a position that sucks. But sometimes, you gotta look at the bigger picture, swallow that. And when I'm fighting over $1,000 for this property, and that property will when it remodels and finishes is going to appraise for $260,000, the percentage of difference is so small, but the
yeah,
dollars feel real, feel really big.
yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, we definitely look at the long term, the other areas, the 5 areas of return, and those have much bigger impacts. And I can personally testify. I mean, I don't remember, a plumbing repair that happened 15 years ago. I can care less. I know my house has good working plumbing, and it always has, and it's stayed occupied, and that's now worth more money, and so that's the long-term approach we like to take for sure. So, well, I mean, obviously we know it's expensive. It happens. It's just kind of part of real estate investing. I think the next section I like to move to is just really hopefully giving some more insights to how to deal with this on a day-to-day basis or even long-term basis. Um, we help, hundreds, if not thousands. We have, thousands of work orders a year, and we deal with a lot of maintenance. But there are things that, hopefully investors and real estate owners are doing to prepare for that. And really, it comes down to budgeting. We hope that, we kind of teach and preach taking a certain percentage of your gross rents and, calculating a kind of a maintenance budget from that. And the prevailing school of thought on that is somewhere between 10 to 20% of your gross rent. Of course, if you have a brand new construction, you could probably be at the lower end of that, but an older home is probably going to be at the higher end of that, if not even more. So that's the first approach, kind of setting expectations. It doesn't mean you have to, and we hope it doesn't happen where you spend that every month, like 10% on like clockwork, but just kind of assuming that on a yearly basis, you're going to spend about that. And I don't know, Chris, if you want to kind of give an example of like, our average rent's about $1,500 a month. So what should that be on a yearly basis, do you think?
Yeah, it really comes down to the age of the home. And I'm curious to hear Jonathan's thoughts on this as well. Particularly, we have homes here in Indianapolis. If you're an investor looking for appreciation, you're probably buying an older home. You're trying to find those areas that are about to gentrify or whatnot. Nick, I'm sure you can speak to this as well. Those homes, those what I call the craftsman homes, those ones that were built before World War II, seem to be, there's a huge advancement that happened in materials and construction practices and things like that between, the beginning of before World War II and World War II after that. And I've even seen a huge difference in the homes here in the Indianapolis market between things built before 1930. That's where we start to see red brick foundations and basements. They're more cellars than they are basements and whatnot. And that's where my rule of thumb would be if I'm buying something pre-war, I'm probably thinking it's going to be that 15 to 20% range. If it's a 2-story, it's probably a little more expensive sometimes if there's more square footage in a 2-story than it tends to be in a 1-story. That's why I have a very particular niche. My business partner knows what kind of homes I'm going to be presenting in front of him. And it's those 1950s and 60s ranches. Those are kind of my sweet spot, the thing that I like for a variety of reasons. But at this point, I'd kick it over to Jonathan and Nate and Nick and see, you know, what your thoughts are on how this budget is affected based on properties.
I think those golden unicorns, those, 20, 30, 40-year-old slab built vinyl village type homes do have a certain allure to them as far as predictability. But it does come down to also how the house has been treated in those 70, 80, 100 years of its existence. If it was getting, routine property maintenance and management, if when they saw the gutters didn't have extenders on them, if that lasted 6 months or 6 years, if they were sealing up, roof leaks and things like that, well, all good things to put into your equation. But I do find the same as you, the older the home, a lot of construction parameters have changed that have to be brought up to snuff once you open the gate on it, for lack of better terms. It is common that, you find that 75, 80-year-old home, you think you're going in for a water heater swap, only to find out you've got some plumbing issues, you've got some rotted flooring under it from where it leaked 2 water heaters ago. Who knows what you find when you bring that up. So the mystery box, the older the home is, definitely the more to consider in the mystery box when you do open up projects. It's definitely more of a roll of the dice situation, less predictable in my.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the properties that I've bought, you talk about how they're maintained, and those ones that say investor special in their in their purchase or sale listings are usually the ones that are not well maintained. The 2 that I have bought, both of them were owner occupants, and they were lived in by somebody who was there for at least 25 years. And what I found with those, they've raised their families, they retired in those homes, and they've over improved those homes. They've made them comfortable. They're well maintained. And really what I need to do is I need to do a cosmetic updating of the properties. And there are, of course, those things that you peel back one layer of the onion, you find the next 2, 3 things that are behind it that you have to address. And yeah, even though I've walked this property and live in it every weekend, if you will, I still get surprised by things that I find, because homes are very complex systems.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think it really comes down to just, I've always believed, I was told this a long time ago by a mentor of mine, that, disappointment's a function of expectations. So, if you expect to, and you budget a certain amount of maintenance, then hopefully that won't disappoint you and makes you sleep at night better, and have less gray hairs, and just be less, stressed and upset about owning real estate. From my personal experience, it's really not about. I mean, we've seen this time and time, and even for smaller investors, it's really hard to cash flow single family homes. And so, but at the same time, there's a lot of upside wealth building events that happen that are non-cash, but you do need to plan for the cash outlays. And so if you can have the mentality of you're going to spend $2,000 to $4,000 a year of your cash flow on maintenance, that will help you, not have ulcers and help you, hopefully enjoy the upsides of owning real estate better. But at the end of the day, we all have budgets, we all have, other needs, and other financial obligations. It really comes down to setting up, reserves, or having ability to have credit lines. And so, that way, when an emergency happens, you're not panicked, or you're not scrambling to try to find out how to pay for it. I mean, a lot of our maintenance gets done with general cash flow from our owners. So we don't have to ask for money to do a lot of maintenance. But obviously, when it's a bigger job, we're going to have to reach out and ask for a contribution so we can get the maintenance done. And having the access to either a reserve account, or having a line of credit, or some other way of getting capital, that would make the process a lot easier. But really, it comes down to just budgeting for that type of thing. One thing that we didn't specifically address here is that, routine maintenance is one thing, but also CapEx planning. And I know, Chris, I mean, really for many years, I kind of really never planned for this, and probably not good to say, but I do think, and I think, Nick, you mentioned this the other day, that we really have to have the mentality you're planning for both at all times.
Yeah,
So
this has been something that where Nick and I have had a couple of deep conversations about budgets and CapEx. And CapEx is, if there's one consistent theme that I've seen amongst a subset of our clients, is that this is a blind spot for them. And so, Nick, I'm curious about, you've got quite a few properties. What are your thoughts on, these rental incomes and how to do the budgeting for repairs and the CapEx side of things?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of ways to think through this. I've always kind of done it on each individual property. Getting back to Scott's earlier point about expectations, I go in with like the worst possible expectations. That way, I'm pleasantly surprised if I'm wrong. But I go into each of them as a percentage of income. Generally, when I'm approaching it. That said, I think the capex planning of 1 to 2% makes a lot of sense as well. Generally speaking, it's hard to necessarily differentiate what's a capex item and what is a repair item. That said, between the two of them, generally speaking, I'm going to account for anywhere from 15 to 25%. And I think that there are a lot of factors that go into that. Like we were talking about, with that in mind, age of the home is one of them. How much work I actually put into it on the front end. Like if you're just, you're getting some house that's old and disgusting, and you're just putting tenants in there, your capex are gonna the capex and budgeting for repairs is going to be significantly higher than if you actually go in there and spend a lot to replace the electrical, replace the plumbing, all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I am going to account for anywhere from 15 to 25% of my total income on a property that I've gone in and I've done a decent amount of fixing up on already. Because I know every single day that roof becomes another day older. Let's say a roof costs $12,000. Like I know that, 12,000 divided by 360 months is about how long I've got on that roof before I have to replace it. So I've got to be putting that money aside or having access, like you were talking about, to lines of credit. At a certain point, if you grow your portfolio big enough, you get some economies of scale such that, like for instance, I haven't made a capital contribution to my property manager in a long time, simply because like it'll just get stolen from my other properties within that PM. So less of a factor once you hit scale, but you're absolutely right. This is something you need to be thinking about. That water heater, that roof, all of those things are dying slowly, and so you need to be prepared for it. The other thing to think about, just so everyone's aware, everybody likes to look at these really high rent to value ratio properties. The ones in the D class neighborhoods that the 1% deals still today. The thing that you don't necessarily think about is, while that $600-$800 rental does do well, the cost of those capex items, the cost of those repairs, are almost identical to an A class property. A 40-gallon water heater is a 40-gallon water heater. Like off leash doesn't really charge any difference on a rental property between an A class and a D class property for that. So as a percentage of your total income, those are going to be significantly more painful when you finally do have those repairs, when you finally do have those capex items. So it's just something to think about, that percentage of the income is going to be so much higher the lower end the property is.
that's a very good point. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Well,
I had
oh, go
a
ahead, Chris.
client, sorry, I had a client last year who came to me and said, "Man, I didn't make any money on my properties," and he had dozens of properties. And so we started digging into it. I was like, "Well, why is that?" And turned out, well, he had a few remodels, some properties that he'd had the same residence in place for 7 years. He had a handful of furnaces. He had a handful of roofs. And when you look at the greater scheme of things, you look at the number of doors that he had in his portfolio and what he was having to do. The statistics of it made sense. It's like, yeah, statistically, you're going to be doing this much in this time frame, and based on the fact that you bought all of your properties, in a very narrow window, and they were all equally or similarly repaired, you're going to have these bursts of things coming along. And in reality, he's like, I didn't make any money because he was budgeting for, if you will, that repair with rents and not
Mm.
saving up in a capex way. It's like, yeah, but if you had actually budgeted this out in a capex, that $10,000 that you spent on a 20-year roof really only cost you $500 a year over 20 years. And now, if you look at it in that way, you made $500 less each year, but you didn't go broke this year. And that thinking is sometimes maybe counterintuitive or just not natural. you know.
Yeah, I think that humans are built to kind of, not worry about things that don't happen yet. But yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to, again, expectation and planning. And, there's different strategies for different investors. And, at the end of the day, like Nick said, you can go in, if your barrier to enter real estate investing has to do with the value of the property, then that's fine. You can buy a lower price property. It's going to have a lower price rent. It's going to, but when it does have maintenance, it's going to be a different ratio because of that. So, hopefully you have that mindset and it doesn't shock you. But planning and doing things strategically is important. Um, there's been many times where we bought a property that I think you alluded to this earlier, Chris, is that maybe you don't replace a roof now because it's 15 years old. It's has 5 years left, and I'm instead going to remodel the kitchen this year. But in 5 years, you got to know that, okay, I need to have a roof at that point. And so really it comes down to just being aware of the condition of the property. What we do in that aspect is we try to provide regular inspections of these homes. We're not home inspectors. We don't provide a full-blown home inspection. We do these evaluations where we'll go out and visit the home um, at a minimum annually, but we also have a program where we offer them semi-annually. But we'll go out and try to, get a snapshot of the current condition of the home, make sure there's no obvious issues that need to be addressed immediately. But then that gives you a general guideline as far as how to plan for, you can see if the carpet's getting older and if the paint is getting worn and you'll be due for a replacement at a near cycle of a turnover. So we want to try to be informative that way, and we do a lot that way to try to give the current condition of the property. Also, a big part of what we preach here is preventive maintenance. Um, we've done this for the 17, 16 years that we've been doing third-party property management. We've always promoted preventive maintenance services for certain items of the home. And furnaces, for example, gutters, other factors like that, where if you're going out there sometimes annually, sometimes semi-annually, checking out the equipment, doing the maintenance on it, you'll get the full life expectancy out of that item. If you don't touch it, it's just like your car. If you don't ever change your oil in your car, it's not going to last 10 years. It's going to blow up at some point. So we do promote that, and we've done a lot lately to even do more in that aspect. We're very proud this year to announce a new comprehensive preventive maintenance package that gives almost every major service in a package that's done twice a year. And we have chosen off leash to do that for us. I think it's a great service that you brought to us, and it really was done to really prolong, the quality of the home and keep cost overall down. So, Nick, I don't know, Nick and Jonathan, if you want to talk about your thoughts on preventive maintenance.
I'll let Jonathan take this one. I feel like I've done too much talking.
Yeah, I appreciate that. No, I appreciate the opportunity, and it's definitely something we believe strongly in. And it obviously came out of years and years of hearing these stories and finding this need is where it was born out of. But kind of circling on all the things we've discussed, whether it be small leaks, whether it be overflowing gutters causing water to get down or just fall off the house and break soffit or fascia or cause water to seep in through the ground. Maintaining and checking on your mechanicals, like your HVAC system, and keeping it up to date with cleanliness and filters, and making sure it's putting out the proper airflow, etc. To avoid those. It's the first 100-degree day in June, and there's the HVAC techs can basically name their number because everybody's behind the 8 ball as far as availability, because there's only so many HVAC techs, but there's more houses with broken heaters or coolers. That's one of the major things, is to avoid the urgent situations. It's always cheaper when it's not urgent, and it's also less frustrating for everyone involved when it's not urgent. So getting into the house and checking on the things that everybody knows eventually goes wrong also allows the homeowner and even the tenant as well as the property manager to sleep better at night, knowing, okay, well, we know the roof's in good shape. We know the gutters aren't overflowing. We know the water's getting away from the house. We've drained out the water heater, so we know it's still functional. It allows everybody to have more peace of mind and less urgency and less surprises. And obviously, I think that turns into lower costs. So we try to come out a couple times a year. Some people want to do it once a year, twice a year. And it's kind of tailored to what's going to happen. So in the winter, we might be checking to make sure outdoor spigots are off or any exposed pipes are either protected or wrapped up, making sure the sump pumps and that kind of stuff are cleaned out going into rainy seasons, or making sure you have attic insulation and there's not a bunch of animals up there. Just those things that seem to come up regularly as urgent or emergency situations. Then there's also a safety standard to it, whether it be checking smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors and GFCIs, cleaning out dryer vents, the stuff that tenants, a lot of times they are required to do these things, but that doesn't mean that they're absolutely getting them done with efficiency and effectiveness and timeliness. So it does seem like there's a little bit of upfront expense or upfront cost to it, but in the long run, whatever that cost may be, I find that it only takes 1 or 2 trips in a surprise fashion a year to easily offset the trips that are going out kind of from in a proactive fashion. And that's kind of our take on why we think it is so important to have preventative eyes on the home, not just when there's times of need.
That's well said. Yeah, you hit on the main issues here is really to stay ahead of significant issues and to reduce those crisis calls. Because again, I went to a seminar earlier this year where a maintenance expert, a national maintenance expert, was talking about how they did studies and residents have one crisis call a year before they get frustrated with their landlord. And so if you can reduce that, and it goes about everything we've said here is this tenant satisfaction is an important part of our business. And we all kind of think about it. It's a mind switch. You have to realize that, we are in business to succeed, and, our owners are small business owners, just like you're a small business owner, Nick, and I'm a small business owner for the property management side. But our customers or our residents, we all depend on them to be satisfied and to stay in their homes. So if they have a lot of maintenance, and if they have more than one emergency or crisis maintenance, they're probably not going to be happy at that house and they're going to move out. So, we want long-term leases. We actually really have worked hard over the last couple of years to get long-term residency. Our renewal rates way up. We offer multiple year leases for the most part from the get-go on new leases. So we want to keep people in there, have that less vacancy, have that less turnover cost. And it really comes down to just keeping the homes maintained. So,
Yeah, I think it's really important to drill it down to this. Resident happiness is typically cheaper than a turnover. Turnover costs right now, NARPM is the industry group for property management companies. It's the North American or National Association, sorry, of residential property managers. And they did a poll last year looking to see what the average cost of a turnover was in property management these days. And it's somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. There aren't very many major repairs out there that I can think of that exceed that. Obviously, we've got furnaces and roofs and things like that, but those are in a different class in my mind because they are ones that bring that home back up to full value. It doesn't add value, but when you have if you're buying a home with a 20-year-old furnace on it, or selling your home with a 20-year-old furnace on it, invariably that buyer is going to ask you to replace that furnace. And so you might as well just knock $10,000 off your price and let them replace it, but they may not have it. And that is probably, you got to think of it this way. There are certain pieces of a house that feel very similar to the resident as getting stranded in the middle of nowhere. And when you lose an HVAC system in the dead of winter or the dead of summer, in the heat of summer, that's where that is a really emotionally painful process. And I've had clients, I had one last year who really tried to save a few $100. He had the best intent in mind. We ended up having that resident to have a painful process for about a month. And that resident isn't going to stick around after that. Likewise, if you have a system that isn't performing well and it's causing increased energy costs to the resident, as soon as that winter bill shows up and they're paying $450, $500 a month for utilities when they're used to paying $200, yeah, when it comes time to renew in March, the thing that's in the front of their mind is what they just spent on those utility bills. It hurts, but I think the best approach is to replace things proactively on your terms. Know that this thing is coming up. You just face the music of it. I'm preaching to the choir myself right now, as I have a home, one of my rental properties. I need to replace the air conditioner. It's built in the 1990s. It's still functioning, but any day that thing's going to conk out. And with tariffs being what they are and what we went through in COVID, there are times where something might force your hands and you might have a higher cost than you would have if you did it when you should have on a turnover.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I'm not saying there we should go replace their furnaces right now, but yeah, at the end of the day, the better you can plan for it and budget for it, that's always beneficial. Um, but yeah, thanks guys. I really appreciate a lot of the insight. Hopefully that's been really informative. I'd like to open it up to you know, uh, any questions from our audience. We have a few minutes here, but while we're seeing if there's any questions, and Chris, you can let me know if there's anything that you want to read off to us. But my final thoughts are is that yes, you have to have the expectation that there's going to be a certain amount of maintenance costs. Try to plan for it and account for it, budget for it. And I'm an accountant by training, so we have spreadsheets galore and we have budgets galore. And Nick, you said you did too. Um, that's those planning purposes. It doesn't always happen that way because this is real life. And so don't get freaked out if you're not on target this year. Hopefully you'll make it up next year. Um, but at the end of the day, it's about maintaining the asset, keeping the residents satisfied, make sure we're complying with all state laws, and really providing the best real estate that we can possibly provide to reduce the vacancies. So I don't know, Chris, any questions you wanted to?
Yeah, we do have one question here from Vera. She's asking, is there a comprehensive list of recommended mandatory maintenance tasks? To the
Well,
top of the first pass on that, what I would say is we do have our T&H standards, which do cover health and safety. Those are obviously mandatory. Then we have things, from the recommended side, and this will touch back on that comprehensive maintenance plan. There are a lot of things that we've set up service agreements because to one degree or another, we feel like these things are value adds or are really necessary. For example, an HVAC clean and check to me is, while it's not a mandatory thing, it is strongly recommended.
yeah, our contract has that built in where we really, really try to push that furnace check because there's a lot of liability with furnaces and carbon monoxide, issues that could happen if it's not well maintained. But yeah, I think you nailed it there. We have our client resources page on our website has a lot of great resources. One of the things that we do is our standards policy that you mentioned is based on the HUD requirements and state of Indiana's requirements. So we at all times have to follow that and make sure we're compliant with all state laws and health department, et cetera. But then again, yes, preventive maintenance wise, I think this comprehensive maintenance program that we're offering now is really the best one-all program that addresses all the major issues that could happen and you should stay on top of on a proactive basis. We offer all the cart services for everything else as well. But we do feel like this is a really amazing value because its retail value is much higher than what we're offering it for. So
I would add one piece to that as well is to say that is there a specific itemized list? Yes, there is, but no, there isn't. The answer is everything. Every property is different. Whether you got to have boots on the ground to see it though. Whether a floor be soft, or they have hidden tenants or hidden pets, or they don't know what they don't know sometimes. So a lot of times you just got to have an eye for it on site to be able to see, hey, that is a slow drip in a P trap, or a toilet that's constantly running that just needs adjustments. You really do have to have somebody in there with an eye of proactivity to really be able to drill down what needs to be analyzed at each property. But the major components, the systems and all that are obvious. But the part that's a little less obvious is, water bills that may be kind of spiking, or electrical bills that might be kind of spiking. So I think that you really just got to get in there and get your hands on it and get a feel for things and see how it's being treated. because sometimes the treatment of the property can give you indications about future maintenance expenses as well. How they're handling themselves.
Yeah, I think, two of the things that are a little surprising sometimes is how much damage water can do. I think we all inherently understand that. But when you've got clogged gutters or water's running back towards the foundation or back in behind the siding, the soffits, things like that, Nick's like, yes, sir, absolutely. That's one of those. And then trees are another one of those surprise thing. The amount of things that trees can do, or it can be pretty surprising. And hand that
Yeah.
over to you because I know you got some thoughts.
Yeah, we were just talking about trees a little bit here on our side. Some of the stuff that we've seen recently, none of my properties, of course, none of them have these issues.
Right.
Some stuff that we've seen with trees, literally in the last couple weeks, are a tree taking out a sewer line. That's something that you need to be aware of. Essentially what happens this isn't something I was aware of until I got into this world, is you've got these sewer lines going out of the house. Tree roots will go right on through those things and cause blockages, cause leaks. Trust me, you want to proactively address that stuff versus having waste come back into the house. That's a bad day. Let me tell you, that gets real expensive versus getting that cleaned out every once in a while. Trees can also have huge impacts on foundations if they're allowed to grow too close to the house and end up kind of knocking in foundations, or potentially could have issues with trees taking out homes. I don't know if anybody's aware, but we just recently had a bunch of tornadoes here in Indiana. It was a pretty scary time actually, and the number of houses that we've gone in and there was tree damages because of that was quite high. So just some stuff to be aware of with trees as well that I again wouldn't have ever really thought about.
Yeah, I mean, trees do damage that's unexpected. It's for example, they can dig underneath shingles and start breaking those shingles up, as the wind moves back and it causes the tree to move back and forth. So I've been really picky. If you come to find my home, you won't find a tree near the foundation, near the roof. Just don't like it. Or, even just it's that semi-annual cleaning out the gutters twice a year. It's like, why do we clean them out twice a year? Well, when the gutters get clogged, especially when it gets cold, and if you don't have a newer roof, that water can ice dam, gets up underneath your roof, goes down into your soffits, and a little problem suddenly becomes a really big problem. And cleaning gutters twice a year, it's not just the leaves falling in the fall, but it's all the stuff that collects over the winter. It can be the granular loss on the root on the shingles. It can be those wonderful maple seeds that we get everywhere that start clogging stuff up. That is an ounce of prevention giving you a pound of cure.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta love it. I mean, I love trees. I'm a nature guy, but they obviously can cause problems with houses. So, but well, hey, thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate that. There's a lot of great insights. I think hopefully we gave some guidance that will help our clients understand the ins and outs of maintenance, how we deal with it, why we deal with it the way we do, and also, just that it will happen and how to budget for that. And some of the things that you can help, to help reduce that surprise factor with preventative services and inspections that we offer. So we hope this helps for you to stay invested in your investment. And if you have any follow-up questions or anything, please feel to reach out to our client relations team. You can simply reach us at owner@threaltyinc.com. But we do thank you today for attending, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, thanks for having us there, Scott and Chris.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah,
Good job, guys.
thank you. All right, have a good one, guys.